Well, welcome everyone to our annual How Being Trauma Informed Improves Criminal Justice System Responses National Trainer Call. Apologies for getting started just a couple of minutes late here. We have one presenter who's having some video issues, so you may or may not see her face today, but she's ready to go, whether she has video or not. I just want to welcome everyone. I'll say good afternoon to those of you for whom it's afternoon, and good morning to those of you for whom it's still morning. Really happy to have you all on the call today. If I can get the next slide, I'll just introduce myself. Some of you may know me or may remember me from a Train the Trainer program. My name is Chan Neither. I am oversee this program on behalf of Policy Research Associates, and I also direct SAMHSA's Gain Center. I know a lot of our Train the Trainer events have been sponsored by the Gain Center, so if you've been trained by SAMHSA through the Gain Center, welcome on behalf of SAMHSA, and if you've been trained by Policy Research Associates or Policy Research Inc., maybe through this MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge or otherwise, we welcome you on behalf of PRA and PRI. I'm opening us today, and I'm going to turn it over just in a moment to Erica Ihara, who is our training program coordinator for this program. She'll be a familiar face to many of you, and for those of you who have been with us a little bit longer, this may be your first introduction to Erica, but she's been our coordinator for about the past 15 months or so, and is doing a fantastic job. She'll be talking with you about the agenda and some of the introductory remarks, and then turn it over to our very own Dr. Lisa Callahan, who is a major fixture in our trauma training program and has delivered many Train the Trainers across the country. So again, maybe a familiar face. And then we'll hear from Dr. Maureen McLeod, who is also maybe a very familiar face, has done a lot of our Train the Trainer programs and is one of our resident scholars with this program, helping us keep abreast of the latest developments in the field and making sure the training is current and reflects feedback that we receive from all of you across the country as we deliver Train the Trainer events and deliver the training itself. So with that, I'll say welcome, and I'll turn it over to Erica, who will start off with the agenda and lead into the rest of our presentation. Erica?
Thank you so much, Chan. Hi, everyone. Just a quick look at today's agenda. We'll be reviewing how to access the online resources that are available to all of you as trainers, present a brief report of the most recent results of the 6-month trainer survey. And the last survey that has been compiled was from January 2023, and followed by a presentation on tips for training and an overview of some of the new resources that have become available since the time of the last trainer call. And then we have reserved some time at the end to hear from all of you in the audience. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take just a moment to remind everyone here how to access the online resources that are available to you as a trainer. We have a password protected website for all trainers, and I'm referring to that today as the trainer portal. The universal sign-in information is provided here on the slide, and you also have this sign-in information in your trainer manual. So if you're working from your book today, you can refer to the tab that is using the trainer guide tab. I believe that's the first tab in your book. Once you've logged in, you select the most recent version of the curriculum, and the most recent is 4.0, and then you click either Policy Research Associates or SAMHSA's Gain Center. The content is the same on both of those tabs. The only difference is the branding. So if you participated in this training through Policy Research Associates, you use the tab that has the PRA branding. And similarly, if you participated through the Gain Center, then you can use the tab that says the Gain Center. Next slide, please. So there is also the online National Trainer Directory. And for those of you waiting to see your names updated on the webpage, we expect the next update to take place sometime in around July of this year. So please stay tuned for that. We've provided the address to access the page here on the slide. And if you're following along today online, once you're on the page, click the bar on the left that says Trauma Training for Criminal Justice Professionals. Once you're on that page, you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page and click the link that says search for a trainer in your area. and a map will pop up and you can look in your region to see what trainers are listed there. Next slide, please. So to update your listing at any time in the future or to be added to the directory, and if you don't see your name there, please email us at the Gain Center and we will include your edit in the next request to SAMHSA to update the website. And as I mentioned, we expect the next update to go live sometime around July 2023. And please keep in mind that the website is refreshed several times per calendar year. And now I will turn this over to Dr. Lisa Callahan for a report out on the January 2023 6-month survey results. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, and welcome everybody. I want to add my welcome to everybody who took the time today to call in for this annual call about the trauma training. I also want to thank those of you who are on the call who have responded to the survey, to the 6-month survey. It's really a way for us to keep keep on top of knowing how extensive and how broadly the training is being delivered nationally. So if the next time you get the email from Erica with the link to do the survey, it's very short, and if you would take a couple minutes out of your day to respond, we'd be really grateful for that. It just gives us a better picture of how widely the trauma training is being delivered nationally. Next slide, please. So this is a map of the distribution of the people who did respond to the last 6-month survey, which was just shy of 100 of you, and from which states those respondents came. So if you see your state on here and find that there's no one responded, then you want to make sure that next time you're one of those who do respond, so your state's represented. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that we want to know is how many trainings you have conducted in the past 6 months. As you may remember, some of you maybe were recently trained, and those of you who perhaps were trained a year ago or even longer than that, we really encourage people to get a training scheduled as soon as possible after going through the TTT, just so it keeps it fresh in your mind. And I can vouch for the fact the more times you do the training, the easier it becomes, but it's also keeps it fresh and keeps the information fresh and keeps it on your mind. So again, encourage you to do the training as quickly as you can after you've gone through the training. Continue to do so. We know that COVID has had an impact on whether or not people have been able to deliver the training. Most of us have just gone back to in-person meetings in the last year or so. So we expect that this 0 column, which is almost half of the people who responded, had not done any training in the past 6 months, but we anticipate that will go up quite a bit as the COVID restrictions are pulled back across the country. Next slide, please. We asked then for the total number of trainings that you've delivered, and as you can see, there's a significant number of people who have done 5 or more trainings. And if any of you are on the call, I'm sure you would agree that the more you do it, the easier it is, and the more you can really get in the groove with how best to deliver this to your audience. But at the same time, there were still about 1/3 of the people who responded who haven't yet been able to deliver the training. So we're going to give you the encouragement to get out there and do that and get it scheduled. Next slide, please. So some of the people who are delivering the training, when we talk about this during the TTT, are there ways that we can do either do it across time, or we can do it with another trainer or trainers. And so most of or around 44 of the people who have not who responded, 44 of you, about half, said that you hadn't been able to deliver the full training yet, and asked for the reasons for that. I was happy to see that none of you responded that you didn't feel confident enough in delivering the training, but really the purposes were, the reasons were really, in many cases, outside of your control, such as time constraints, lack of an audience, and that you had delivered portions of the training, but not the entire training, probably with a co-trainer. Next slide, please. So one of the questions, and this is a little perhaps subjective on the part of the respondents, is we want to know whether or not your jurisdiction, agency, department, whatever your entity is, whether you've had any feedback as to any impact that the training has had on your audience. And 78 of you responded to this question, and about 20% of you said that it you had gotten feedback. And on the next slide, I believe, these are some of the observations in response to this. So we didn't just ask you whether or not you had gotten feedback from those you trained, but also gave you an opportunity to share some of those observations with us. I'm not going to read through these for you because you obviously can do that yourself, but I think it's very rewarding for us to see that many of the people who are doing the training do report back that it's had an impact that they've observed from the people that they've trained, that having gone through this training has had an impact on them. And I think my co-trainers from PRA and the Gain Center will probably agree with me. One of the downsides of doing this on a national level is we often don't have an opportunity to interact with the communities after the fact. So we're always really anxious to get feedback from you again for, during the surveys. The 6-month surveys gives you an opportunity to just pass on some of the feedback you've gotten, because we don't really have an opportunity to circle back with the communities, and we like to know if it's having the intended results. Next slide, please. We also ask a question of whether or not this training has resulted in any changes in policy or procedure or practices. And again, 77 people responded to this, and about 20% of you said that it had resulted in some kind of policy or procedure changes as the result of the training. And on the next slide then, again, similar to the last open-ended question, we ask you to give us some examples. And again, this is really valuable information for us to have. Not only do we, it gives us some reinforcement that we're approaching the TTT in the right way, and that you as trainers are out there delivering it, but we can also, we pass along this information back to SAMHSA, who's our funding source for all of the trauma training that we do. So to the extent you are willing to and able to make some comments the next time you get the survey about any kind of procedures or policies that have changed or have come about as the result of the training, we'd really like to hear back from you. Next slide, please. I now am turning the baton over to Dr. Maureen McLeod with some training tips.
Thank you, Lisa. Like my colleagues, Lisa, Erica, and Jan, I too want to thank you for taking the time this afternoon to join us for this call. I hope that it's beneficial for you, and certainly it's meaningful for us to hear from you. I also want to apologize. I'm the one who's having trouble with my camera today. I suspect if I totally reboot my system, I can get it to work, but then it will take me another 20 minutes to get back. So you can look at the picture of me on the screen. I think that, since the pandemic started, I have delivered, I'm not sure how many of the TTTs, but I probably have had several of you in the training. So I just want to welcome you back. So today I want to talk a little bit about some training tips that are related to 3 of the areas that I think reflect where we've gotten most of the questions about the new version. So we're going to take a look at the virtual delivery of the curriculum, which has already been somewhat alluded to, effective delivery of the revised Module 6, and the cultural framing within the curriculum. A number of you over the last year and a half have expressed not just interest, but some curiosity about how they can do that most effectively. So let's take a look, starting with virtual delivery. So next slide, please. Okay, so there are many of us, I guess, prefer in-person delivery of the curriculum, but other trainers, either because of preference or logistical necessity, may be employing virtual delivery. We can assure you that virtual delivery can be very successful, but it does require some operational modification. As illustrated on this slide, if you look on the lower right and you see where there's a little arrow pointing to some resources that are available on the trainer portal, you can see that we have created and posted to that portal a new 4-page fact sheet that walks you through the overarching needs, materials, and modifications for virtual delivery. And outlined in this resource guide are tips for platform consideration, modifications to the group activities in modules 2 and 4, and certainly other presentational tips. And I just want to focus on just a few of those today. And I really encourage you to download that resource document as soon as possible to be able to read through it and familiarize yourself with it. So in terms of platform consideration, when the pandemic required the Gaines Center trainers to transition to virtual delivery, we experimented with several platforms, and we decided that Zoom best served our needs. Now, you may determine that some other platform, maybe Teams or WebEx, work better for you. What is essential is that you utilize a system, a delivery platform that accommodates the embedded curriculum, both the slides and the videos. Similar to an in-person delivery, you and or your IT support staff need to make sure that you test the technology to ensure that the sound is working and it's synced with the video presentations. And the resource document that I spoke about provides more detailed guidance on how to address some of these issues on Zoom. And most of our comments in that document do in fact refer to Zoom, because that is the platform that we've discovered works the best for us. In terms of the modifications to the group exercises in virtual delivery, that guide also provides tips for replacing the in-person easel sheets with whiteboards that have been specifically prepared for use with the traumatic events activity in Module 2 and the individual differences activity in Module 4. If you incorporate these whiteboards into your virtual delivery, there's different options for recording participant responses. And I just wanted to present a couple of those to you so you can start thinking about what you think is going to work for you. One of them isn't necessarily better than the other. It will really depend on the size of your audience and what the setup is for your particular room and your personal preferences. So one thing that you can do is, as the participants provide responses to the questions that are in the activity packet, you may want them to give those responses orally, if you have a smaller group size, or perhaps you're going to ask people to enter responses in a chat box. You can have a co-trainer or a member of an IT staff transcribe the information onto the whiteboard for you. Trying to juggle that yourself, the exercise facilitation and the transcription, that's a heavy lift. And we really don't recommend that you do that yourself. Another approach is that participants could transcribe their responses manually directly onto the whiteboard using the annotation option on Zoom. This option can become, in my opinion, a bit unwieldy pretty quickly if there's a large number of responses, as the entries can overwrite each other. Nevertheless, if you choose this option, you may want to consider giving your participants some instruction on how to use the annotation function before you ask them to actually use it in modules 2 and 4. Recently, within the last, I would say maybe the month and a half or so, we have experimented with Jamboard. Jamboard is a Google product, and we're not trying to sell Google. It's a free app that was presented to us by somebody we know who said they had tried it and it seemed to work. It allows participants to click on a virtual Post-it note so that they can directly populate the easel sheets. There's probably some other good options out there if you're interested in looking, but we found Jamboard, in our opinion, most closely simulates individuals writing responses on Post-it notes and walking up and placing them on the easel sheets in front of the room in an in-person delivery. It's kind of fun to see as well. Next slide, please, Julie. Okay, this is another area. I mean, if you were trained on an earlier version of the trauma training, Module 6 looks a lot different to you. In the current version 4, which is the dual purposes of this final module, Module 6, are identified as exploring how systems may have policies, procedures, and practices that may be re-traumatizing, and then brainstorming how the systems can improve the potentially re-traumatizing policies, procedures, and practices by making them trauma-informed and thus less re-traumatizing. So we use the sequential intercept map as the framework for engaging our participants in this conversation. There's a one-page description of the map in the participant resources list on the portal, and there's a much more detailed 5-page fact sheet that's entitled Trauma-Informed Responses that's available also on the portal. And I highly recommend that you download that 5-page document and keep it handy because it's just so incredibly useful. The trainers have observed increasing number of participants are self-reporting some familiarity with the SIM map. That's certainly promising because an understanding of the 6 intercepts is really important for engaging in meaningful dialogue in this exercise. And if there is going to be the optional strategic planning expansion activity that you go through with your community, clearly everybody has to have an understanding of the intercepts of the SIM. So you want to make sure if you're going to facilitate this 45-minute exercise or the optional expansion activity, you want to make sure that all the participants have a foundational understanding of the common processes and procedures that may impact persons entering or exiting the criminal justice system. And for purposes of the module, the exercise combines the 6 intercept points into 3 groupings for examination. So grouping number 1 includes intercept 01, which is community-based crisis responders and law enforcement. Intercept grouping 2 includes intercepts of 2 and 3, detention, pretrial services, courts, and correctional services. And the third intercept grouping includes intercepts 4 or 5, which include reentry and community corrections. Now, wouldn't it be ideal if your session participants could be divided evenly across all the 3 intercept groups based on either their employment focus or their self-reported interests? Let's go with that hypothesis of that hypothetical situation just for a moment. For an in-person delivery, you may want to assign the members of each of the intercept groups to a separate table. We oftentimes would, when we were still doing in-person, we'd say, okay, everybody who is going to be a member of group 1, which would be intercept 01, go sit at that table over there. Sometimes they really like the opportunity to get up, walk to another table, sit with some people they haven't talked with earlier on in the training. So you could send them to another corner of the room, but just to give them a more quiet space so that they can focus on the topic and they can talk to each other. In a virtual delivery, you can do the same thing in the sense of having breakout rooms. So this is where you also would like to have some qualified IT staff that know how to do breakouts. You can certainly do it in Zoom, but if you're like me as a trainer without all that expertise, I probably couldn't put you in breakout rooms. But your IT folks should be able to do that for you. As indicated in the activity packet instructions for Module 6, the trainer asks participants to think about 1 or 2 policies, procedures, or practices that occur within the purview of that intercept grouping that may be traumatizing and that may be subject to discretionary modification. Once the group has identified these events or processes, the trainer then asks them to consider what modifications might be introduced to make the policy or procedure less traumatizing. Then the trainer can ask the group to identify a spokesperson for the purposes of reporting out, or if you prefer as a trainer, you can invite all the group participants to contribute to the report out. Again, it's really your preference. And the size of the overall group may help guide your decision-making as to how you want to do that report out session. Okay, I said that was hypothetical. Everybody was just divided evenly across the 3 intercept groups. Realistically, achieving participatory balance across the 3 intercept groupings can be hard to achieve especially if your group is very homogeneous, all law enforcement officers, all court staff, all correctional officers. So there are some alternative approaches for facilitating the module where you have everybody who wants to be in one intersect grouping, or the predominance of people who want to be in one of the intersect groupings and fewer people in the others. One option, I'm going to present 3 alternative approaches for you to think about. Again, you decide which one seems to work for you. One is to ask session participants to self-select into the one of 3 groups and be prepared to supplement their responses with some intercept appropriate examples from your own experience or from that 5-page fact sheet that's available to you via the trainer portal, because that fact sheet provides some of those examples. A second approach might be to randomly assign folks into one of the 3 intercept groupings, asking them to consider potentially re-traumatizing impacts that might occur within those intercept decision points based on where they have some knowledge. Again, be prepared to supplement the group responses, because in all likelihood, they may not know much about that particular intercept grouping. Another approach is to shift to a large group process, asking your group collectively, rather than placing them into one of the 3 groups, ask them collectively and say, listen, we're going to look at all these 3 intercept groupings. We're going to brainstorm as a group about policies, procedures, practices at each of the stages in the criminal justice system that may be traumatizing. Then we as a group collectively are going to suggest some modifications. This option, in my experience, works a little bit better with smaller groups, but again, always be prepared to supplement their responses with some additional thing. Julie, if you could move on to the next, please. Okay, the cultural framing. Cultural framing, many people aren't familiar with that construct. And I think it was Irving Goffman who first started talking about framing. And traditionally, it refers to that shared meanings that are adopted by individuals to better allow them to understand events and situations within an organization or culture. It sounds like a lot of gobbledygook. Let me explain it to you a little bit more. The process of framing allows persons to reduce some ambiguities by contextualizing information and connecting it with what we already know to shape a response. The process of cultural framing can communicate negative or positive beliefs or attitudes about a group of interest, and can contribute to negative or positive interactions based on beliefs. So let's look at negative and positive framing, and hopefully you'll see where I'm going with this. So negative framing can result in some cognitive bias if persons use these shared meanings to establish stereotypes based on sociocultural or physical attributes. But framing can have a positive effect if our interpretation of the frames lessen the dissonance between the groups of interest. That is, it moves away from the us versus them mentality towards more of a mentality of acceptance. The development of cultural competence is a good first step for positive cultural framing, but it's not enough. So let's look first at what we mean by cultural competence, and then we'll move on to a discussion of cultural humility as an enhancement of cultural competence. So when we talk about cultural competence, it's loosely defined as this ability to engage knowledgeably with persons across cultures. So for some people, there's an assumption that having some knowledge about another culture is somewhat static, in that what I know about that culture is relatively unchanging and can be generally applied to other persons within that culture. If you use this lens, you might consider yourself after a while to become, well, I'm fully competent. I know everything there is to know about this group. Cultural humility says, not so quick. It doesn't work like that. It's not that simplistic. Cultural humility is a framework that posits that personal identities are multi-layered and complex. Moreover, cultural humility recognizes that personal identities are really dynamic and they shift over time with changing circumstances. So if you adopt a lens of cultural humility, you acknowledge that we're never really fully competent in our understanding of a person's experience. A stakeholder who operates with cultural humility needs to be cognizant of their own personal biases and privilege, and has to be willing to listen to and learn from those with whom we interact on a personal or professional basis. Cultural humility can be strengthened through representation of diverse stakeholders in decision making, really listening, recognizing that everybody's experience is important, is an important contribution. It's for cultural humility, we also can strengthen it by recognizing that accepting cultural processes of others, it might be difficult for us. I mean, we talk about teaching old dogs new tricks, and that's what we're talking. You know, we're saying we need to move back from simply viewing ourselves as culturally competent. We need to recognize the fact that we have more to learn. There's much more to do. So in trauma training, if we want to engage in cultural framing, how do we adopt that lens of cultural humility? What might it look like? And as the slide indicates, there's a number of things we can do. First is really know who our audience is, not just their names and their professional affiliations as it appears maybe on a list of participants, but also get to know a little bit about what they do, what's important to them. You know, sometimes we will ask communities, say, you know, why do you want to participate in this? Why is this important to you? So you get to know some of who your audience are. And providing relevant statistics about the community, not always possible. There are some communities where there have been folks, maybe in the government or some bureaucracy, that have collected data that are about the people in the community. If you can get access to that and you can present it to those who are in your training, that's important information because you're telling them something about themselves, and that's really going to resonate with them. You know, national statistics, sure, it's good to know about national statistics, but knowing about the statistics in community A or community X that have been drawn from that community can be very, very powerful. Providing supplemental resources also can be very empowering. You might have to do some research on your own. You may need to call around. It does mean it could be extra work on your part, but it can be well worth it to demonstrate to those who are in your session that you take their experiences very seriously and you recognize that their experiences are their experiences and not the experiences that can be generally applied to everybody across an agency or a community. You know, think about what we say in Module 4, individual differences into how we talk about the experience of being exposed to trauma is unique to every individual. And I think that that's part of cultural humility, is recognizing that there are some similarities, but there are certainly differences. We can also adopt a lens of cultural humility by using person-first language, so that we're not talking about addicts. We're talking about persons who have substance use disorders. We're not talking about the homeless. We're talking about persons who may be experiencing housing insecurity. It tells us more about, we are recognizing you are a complex individual. That one of those sociocultural labels or demographic labels isn't the definer. So in saying that you're a homeless person, we seem to be negating everything else there is to know about you. Yeah, that might be one piece. Housing insecurity might be one piece of who you are, but you are so much more. So using person first language can be very helpful. And I see Heather saying, I have noticed when delivering this training, there appears, let me see if I can get this up for you, Heather. Yeah, we may have to ask you to repeat. There appeared to be a much different level of understanding of the demonstrated behavior reactions of clients the closer the staff position was to working directly with the individual client population. There were less questions related to why do they do X when they were raised with the same social values as the rest of us type of comments. I think what we might want to do if we have some time, Heather, is ask you to expound on that, because I think that's an important observation on your part. Co-training with local personnel, somebody from the community, also can help us in, because if we're not from the community or if we're from a small part of that community, having somebody who has a better sense of the community and how the community responds to certain types of events. I'm thinking about First Nations communities that when we go in and do some training and they talk about some of their healing circles and some of how they respond to certain events in the community, we might not know that. But if we include somebody from the community to be a co-trainer, we can learn a tremendous amount about that community, and the community that is participating in the training can get a better sense of, can be empowered to better adopt the constructs of the training, the trauma training, because they will hopefully, they will think we're taking their positions more seriously. So I'm going to, I guess I'm going to turn it over to Chan. Next slide, please, Julie. No, I would take it back, not Chan, Erica. Erica is going to take us through some of the new resources. Yeah, Chan's shaking his head because he's like, I don't know how to get to those. So, Erica has the expertise. So Erica, please show us the new resources, because we do have some wonderful new resources.
Thank you, Maureen. And thanks to everyone who's putting your comments in the chat and the Q&A. So we're queuing these up. And we're going to have some time at the end to get into some discussion about that. So I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to highlight some new resources that have become available since the time of the last trainers call. And all of these resources are accessible through the trainer portal. And if you took part in your Train the Trainer event more than a year ago, these resources were not yet available at the time that your training took place. So next slide, please. So first, there are two new fact sheets, which are on the trainer portal, and they're listed in the references and resources link under the trainer guide header. And again, if you took your training in the last year or so, these should already be in your book that you received in the mail. If you did the Train the Trainer earlier, you can print these fact sheets if you'd like to include them in your references and resources tab. Both fact sheets focus on historical trauma, one specifically focused on Indigenous people and one specifically focused on Black people in the United States. Next slide, please. And we also have added some new video resources. So these are privately listed on YouTube, so you can only access them through the trainer portal. And please refer to the training demonstration and training module talkbacks headers on the trainer portal to find these video resources. The training demonstration is a filmed training delivery in the in-person format. So if you did this training recently in the virtual format and want to see what it looks like delivered in a face-to-face setting, you can see that here. There are also the training module talkbacks, and these are films of each slide that are within the 4-hour training, with a voiceover. It's actually Dr. McLeod narrating the objectives for each module and reviewing tips for delivery. And for those of you who are working with the training for judges and court staff curriculum, so this is the 2-hour version, 2.0 training, there's also a new film training demonstration of this curriculum as well on the trainer portal. And next slide, please. And we now have the version 4.0 curriculum videos with Spanish language captioning available. So if any of you are interested in delivering the curriculum to audiences where Spanish is the first language and it would be beneficial to have the Spanish language captioning instead of English, please contact the Game Center and we will provide you access to those videos. Next slide, please. And finally, we've created some new community planning tools for promoting your events. And these are things like save the date flyers, registration forms. And these are designed to be compatible with a variety of electronic mailing formats and also social media. And you can find these with both the PRA and the Gaines branding on the trainer portal. These are listed under the trainer materials header. And that is it for new resources since the last call. So I'm going to turn this back over to Chan Neither, and he will lead us through the final portion of today's call.
Great. Thank you, Erica and Lisa and Maureen. So we've got about 15 minutes left in our national trainer call today, and we're going to ask you to share your experiences, but also if you have questions that you want to ask of those of us who are on the call today, that you do so by either raising your hand and we'll unmute you if you want to ask your question directly using voice rather than text, or you can put your comments or questions in the chat. We'll go ahead and open that up, and I will just ask someone to help me moderate the chat as people are also asking questions over voice. So with that, I think we want to go to the next slide or this slide out. Yeah. So sharing your experiences or the Q&A, and same set of directions, whichever you'd like to do. And if anybody wants to ask their questions directly, just go ahead and raise your hand.
And so, Chan, I'm thinking, so Heather Giancola had a comment in the chat and Maureen had asked her, Heather, if you're comfortable unmuting, we'll unmute you and let you elaborate on your comment that you put in the chat around cultural humility. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me, Erica? All right, so I had just brought that up because as we were talking about the cultural humility piece, it reminded me of something that recently occurred in one of our trainings. And it was, I had 3 different groups of professionals in the room. And so different ways of viewing the world, different ways of interacting with clients. And there was a person who had said something that sounded kind of elitist and judgmental. And I knew the person and I knew that that's not where their heart was. But it made me really think further about using, cultural humility and just cultural competency while applying this training, because it helped me to kind of conceptualize that it's not just the client groups we're working with, but our clients are also our stakeholders that we're training. And so it just really helped me be more aware of that and for future trainings to kind of incorporate that into my thinking and also to help others be aware of that too, so that we can still be hearing the same information, but maybe interpreting it different. And so somehow I feel like that's important for us. I'm glad Maureen brought that up because it struck me and it kind of helped me make sense out of everything that happened in that training. And I can kind of finally put a label on it and understand it. So I was just sharing for that reason.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Somebody else has their hand up, but I'm looking at in the Q&A pod. An anonymous attendee posted, not strictly related to Module 6, but overall on the training team is strictly giving virtual trainings as we are throughout the state. And one piece of feedback is that the participant thought the connection with each other or other participants was missing. Topic is sensitive and feels as though the participants need to be able to communicate with each other, not just listen to the presenters, no matter how good they are. Any advice on how we can encourage more participant interaction with each other or virtually while staying on schedule? I can take that, or I don't know, Lisa, Maureen, Erica, if you want to jump in on that. some of the strategies that you've used.
Well, this is Maureen speaking. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think that that's lost by the virtual delivery, that when we were doing in-person deliveries, you were able to sit at tables and talk with people and move around during some of those small group exercise. That piece is lost. I think we all will concede that fact. One thing that we have done in more recent trainings, and I know that it's it doesn't replace the getting to know you part of in person. We're asking or giving the participants an opportunity at the beginning. We have that half hour built in at the kind of in the front end of the virtual deliveries to type in an introduction of themselves into the chat so that they can learn a little bit about other people. We try to build in some time at the end of day one. Another thing we have done that we, what you wouldn't be doing because it's not part, you wouldn't be doing train the trainer, you'd be just doing the 4 hour, is we've built in an opportunity to maybe they could talk to each other online and have an opportunity to talk and get to know each other. It is difficult. So I'm going to see now, Chan and Lisa and Erica, maybe you have some other ideas like this too, because certainly we agree that if you have established a relationship, created a community out of your TTT group, that they are more able or more willing to continue to talk about it with each other following the training. So, yeah, we recognize, yeah, we want to get to know each other a little bit more. I mean, if you're doing it virtually, if you have the luxury of time, if you could build in, you know, but you also mentioned the anonymous attendee, you're trying to keep it within the 4 hours. And that's what makes it difficult, is keeping it in that 4 hours. Chan or Lisa or Erica, did you want to add anything there?
Well, I think, you know, some of the, you know, technique that we use when we deliver the training virtually is having breakout rooms, especially with module 6, because most of that module is an activity, and that the discussion time for that module in smaller groups is a little bit longer than for some of the other activities. I know that's at the end of the training, so you're kind of, you know, getting people to interact sort of and then end the training. So you know, for earlier modules, it may not be quite as easy to break in to smaller groups. I think if you have the luxury of having more than 4 hours and you want to extend it a bit, you can build in more of that kind of breakout time or smaller group time into some of the earlier activities, perhaps. But also, you know, facilitating some of the exercises and activities is more of a discussion, especially around the videos, and giving a chance to for all the participants to open up and really have that discussion, as opposed to it being, you know, more didactic in nature with some of the work that you're doing. So I think sometimes the video discussions get a little bit shortchanged. So being, I guess, more purposeful about giving time to those discussions, because those are built in ways, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, but to get your folks to interact, you know, more with one another earlier on in the process.
And Chan, related to that, one person has put in the chat here that they split up the curriculum. It looks like maybe across 2 sessions. And so certainly if that's something that works for your setting, that is something you could think about doing, you know, if that potentially helps with engaging people for a shorter period of time for each sitting.
I think that's great. Yeah, and I would encourage you, if you're not, if you're on and you're not seeing the chat, to make sure that you're looking at the chat, because there are a lot of great suggestions from your colleagues out in the field about how they're doing things differently or tweaking things to, especially in a virtual environment, to make them a little bit smoother, or, you know, more of an approximation of what you would do in person. Do we have any other, do we have any voice questions, or do you want to look at some more chat questions?
Chan, I'm going to pull a question out of the chat because it seems to be coming up a couple of times here. So Maureen spent quite a bit of time telling people about the fact sheet around the SIM and examples of trauma-informed modifications. Still some questions around that. So so this one is specific to court professionals. And so this is from Diane Gonia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. My audience has been criminal justice treatment court professionals, and they continue to struggle with how to apply what they've learned into policy and practice in Module 6. Any suggestions? And related to that, a couple of people I think are asking for additional guidance, if we have it, around examples at all of the intercepts, and just, you know, how do you put together a list and have that on hand for delivering Module 6 when people don't have suggestions from the audience?
Sure. I can take that one, or at least I saw you on mute, so I'll punt to you.
So with regard to the treatment court professionals, I think one of the obvious, you know, I guess, positions is that when we start talking about ways in which the criminal justice system can become more trauma informed, sometimes we in fact use treatment courts as an example of you know, kind of slowing down the process, spending more time with clients, getting to know them, not responding to just their biography, but also to the depth of what we know about them and the experiences they've had and are having. But I think if you were to go through, and it's in Module 6, there's sort of the principles of a trauma-informed approach, and think about the extent to which you're maximizing each of those in your policies and practices within your court. You probably would find, if you sat down and like at a brown bag or something like that with all your treatment court staff, you will probably find some ways that maybe it didn't occur to you that some of your policies are not as trauma informed as they might be. I would also really encourage you to ask the people in your participants, especially those who are graduated or nearing graduation, as long as they feel safe giving you feedback, I think they probably would be your best, give you the best information about maybe ways that made them not feel so comfortable, and some policies and practices that actually felt them, they immediately knew they were not in a regular courtroom. You know, they somehow felt appreciated and heard and seen, and all those ways in which the regular courts often aren't for people. So I think that if you were to set aside some time, I don't know, you know, what your position is in terms of whether you can require this or talk to your judge about doing this, maybe one Friday a week, you know, meet over lunch, bring your lunches and just tackle it, you know. So are we empowering people in this, or are we making them overly dependent on us? Are we everything to them? Are we, you know, do we have practices and policies in place that people can really wean themselves away from the level of support that we provide for them in our treatment court? I'm just using that as one example. Are there any changes to our physical environment that we might want to make? Maybe the judge should consider not wearing a robe, or maybe the judge should consider meeting in the jury room instead of in the regular courtroom. Maybe there are people who really can't fully engage because they're really uncomfortable with so many people in the room of people behind them. Maybe meet with them separately with their attorney, and you know, some ways to really troubleshoot. And I think that people on your team will probably, given the opportunity, have some really good suggestions. And I promise you, if you ask people who've been part of your court program as the participants, they'll have some good suggestions of how to become more trauma informed.
We've got time for probably just about one more. Do we have anybody queued up? Voice?
Hi,
The
Pamela.
question about the universal portal. Do we see that somewhere?
Yes, this is Pam, and my apologies for joining at such a late time. I'm just now getting the email. I've been out in the field, but I noticed a link and sign-in information was listed. So how do I use that? I mean, do I
Sure.
need to create my own username because I didn't see a section to say create an account when I clicked on it, and that information doesn't work.
Sure, I can answer that. So, so first of all, Pamela, this event is recorded, and we are going to be posting the recording on the trainer portal in the coming weeks, so you can just download it on demand in the future. The sign-in information that we put in the chat is the same information that's in the first tab of your manual, and this is the universal login information that everyone here can use to access all of the materials on the trainer portal. And we do not change that password. So it's just, that's the password that works for everyone. And so you have unlimited access to everything on the portal.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, well, I think it's 3:29. So if we want to just put up the last slide. And I also want to say, as the last slide's popping up, that I'm really pleased to see how many people joined us today. We lost a few folks at the Q&A, but we were up to, I think, almost 120 trainers from across the country, which I think this is the first time we've been above 100 on one of these national trainer calls. And I think that is a testament to how many folks are using this training out in the field, and the reach that we're getting through our Train the Trainer events. I encourage you, as Erica said, we're in the process of, always in the process of updating the trainer database, but adding a lot of the new folks. So if you're someone who was trained, a year, a couple, or a few years ago, and you want to look to see if there are any new trainers in your area or within your state, be on the lookout for some updates to the map. And just, again, stay connected. We say at the end of every Train the Trainer that we are here for you, whether it's through the Gaines Center. I know that's the majority of you were trained, or directly through Policy Research Associates. We're all the same people, and we're all here on the other end. If you ever need any assistance with anything, support, technical, educational tips for delivery, anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here on the other end of the line, and we're here to help and support you. So thanks again for your participation. I'll say thanks on behalf of my fellow co-presenters, and keep your eyes peeled for that next 6-month survey coming out on the listserv. And hopefully we'll see you and hear from you all again next year when we do another one of these training calls. So appreciate it. Have a good day, everyone, and take good care.